Say it, Arya. Tell them you stole it. That was the first thing Damon spit at me, sharp, poisonous, echoing across the marble conference room as if it had been rehearsed. The entire hall went still. Investors froze mid-breath. Cameras lifted in perfect, hungry unison. Conversations died instantly, replaced by a suffocating tension that pressed against my ribs. My younger brother stepped into the center of the room like a performer entering his final act. His eyes were burning, not with hurt or confusion, but with something far more dangerous, entitlement sharpened into hatred. Dad meant for the company to be mine, he yelled. She forged the documents. She cheated every single one of you. A ripple of shock moved through the board. Someone gasped. Another whispered, "Is she serious?" I could feel their stares scraping across my skin, weighing me, judging me, rewriting my story in real time. My father's portrait hung behind them all, watching the chaos unfold with its usual stern expression, but for the first time, it felt like the face of a stranger. Damon slid a thick folder across the table, his smirk slow and venomous, as if he had been waiting years for this moment. And that's when it hit me, cold, brutal, undeniable. One sentence from my own brother just shattered my entire life. Most people only knew me as Arya Vance, daughter of Richard Vance, the man who built Vance Innovations from nothing but a rented garage and a head full of impossible ideas. But before I was a CEO, before the shareholders trusted me with every breath this company took, I was just a girl trying to outrun the weight of my own family. I'm 29 years old, but some days I feel like I lived all of those years inside one long storm. My job? Chief Operating Officer turned interim CEO. The title Damon insists should have been his, even though he never showed up on time to a single board meeting unless someone texted him the night before. People see me and say I'm composed, calm, strong. Someone once told me I walk like I already know the outcome of every room I enter. What they don't know is that confidence wasn't born. It was carved, out of fear, out of expectations, out of every moment someone told me I wasn't enough, or worse, too much. My personality, if I had to describe it, is simple. I don't shout. I don't explode. I don't fall apart where anyone can see me. I learned young that in my house, emotions were weapons, and showing mine only made me bleed. But there is one wound I never healed from. My father, Richard Vance, raised me like a soldier and my brother Damon like a prince. His rules for me were brutal. Earn everything. Don't complain. Work harder. Be better. But Damon, he was the son the house revolved around. The baby. The heir. The one who got away with everything from wrecking cars to skipping school, because everyone said he was just figuring things out. I spent my childhood trying to be seen. Damon spent his expecting applause for breathing. Maybe that's why my deepest wound wasn't the favoritism. It was this one sentence my father once said when I was 13, said casually, without any idea he was breaking me. Arya will run the company until Damon is ready. Until he's ready. Not if. Not when he earns it. Just, until. That was the moment I realized I would spend my entire life proving myself, while Damon would inherit things he never even reached for. And maybe that's why I worked the way I did. I graduated high school 2 years early. I earned a business degree while interning full-time. I slept under my desk more times than I slept in my own bed. Because I had a dream, a simple one. To build something that wasn't handed to me. To create a life that was mine, not borrowed, not conditional, not temporary. I wanted to take my father's company global. I wanted to innovate instead of maintain. I wanted to be known for what I built, not for being Damon's older sister. But dreams become fragile when the people closest to you are threatened by them. And Damon, even back then, hated how easily I excelled. He hated the compliments I got. He hated how our father looked at me whenever I delivered something perfectly while he barely showed up. He learned early that he didn't have to work to get attention. But he also learned that nothing enraged him more than seeing me get it. And maybe I should have seen it coming. The resentment in his eyes whenever I brought home another medal. The way he slammed his bedroom door whenever Dad congratulated me. The quiet, chilling stare he'd give me at family dinners, like he was memorizing everything I had so he could take it someday. I ignored all of it. Because we were family. Because brothers don't become enemies. Because I believed if I loved hard enough, if I succeeded gently enough, Damon would eventually grow into the man Dad always pretended he was. But people don't become better just because you hope for it. And the older we grew, the more Damon began to realize something he couldn't stand. I wasn't just holding the company for him. I was becoming the one everyone trusted to lead it. My dream was becoming real. And his entitlement was becoming rage. Looking back, all the signs were there. But the truth is, life doesn't hand you warnings in bold letters. Sometimes the disaster is already sitting in your living room, smiling like your own blood. And I didn't know, not yet, that the brother I grew up protecting would one day try to destroy everything I built just to feel like he mattered. I didn't know the storm he was preparing. And I definitely didn't know what he was about to do next. When people talk about childhood trauma, they imagine shouting or bruises or doors slamming. Mine was quieter. It lived in small looks, in decisions made without me, in the way the room always tilted toward Damon even when I was the one standing in it. My parents never said they loved Damon more. They didn't have to. Love shows itself in patterns. And in our house, every pattern bent in his direction. Damon was the miracle baby. The surprise blessing. The one my mother said arrived when she had almost given up hope. I arrived first, planned and practical, like an obligation already fulfilled. By the time Damon came along, the story had changed. He was magic. I was background. At breakfast, if there was one pancake left, it went to Damon because he's growing. If I asked for it, my mother would sigh and say, "Aria, don't be difficult." I learned early that wanting things made me difficult, but Damon wanting things made him adorable. The first painful incident I remember clearly happened when I was 8. I had worked for weeks on a science fair project, building a small wind turbine out of recycled parts. I stayed up late cutting cardboard, burning my fingers on glue, rehearsing what I would say to the judges. The night before the fair, Damon wandered into my room and knocked it over while chasing one of his toy cars. The blade snapped. The base cracked. I stared at it in silence, my throat tight, my chest buzzing like I might explode. Damon laughed and said, "Oops," then ran downstairs. When my parents came up, my father frowned at the mess and asked what happened. Before I could answer, Damon piped up from the hallway. "She left it where I could trip." My mother looked at me, tired already, and said, "Aria, you should have been more careful. You know your brother doesn't watch where he's going." I wanted to scream that it wasn't an accident. I wanted someone to ask how long I'd worked on it. Instead, I swallowed the words and rebuilt what I could with tape. At the fair the next day, Damon got ice cream for being patient, and I got third place and a reminder not to sulk. That was the first time I understood the rules. Damon broke things. I absorbed the consequences. The second incident came a few years later, when I was 12 and Damon was 9. I had been selected to play piano at a school assembly. It was a big deal for me. Music was the only place I felt visible. I practiced until my wrists ached, imagining my parents in the audience, finally looking at me with pride. The night before the assembly, Damon threw a tantrum because he wasn't allowed to bring his handheld game to dinner. He kicked the bench where my sheet music was laid out, sending pages fluttering everywhere. One page ripped clean down the middle. I shouted. I couldn't help it. My voice came out sharp, cracked with panic. My father snapped back instantly. "Don't yell at your brother." "But he ruined it," I said, holding up the torn page. Damon's face crumpled, perfectly timed. "I didn't mean to," he sniffed. My mother wrapped him in her arms and shot me a look that felt like a verdict. "You know how sensitive he is. You're older. Act like it." I played the assembly the next day with a photocopied page taped together. I scanned the audience the whole time. Damon waved at me, grinning. My parents weren't watching. They were whispering to him, keeping him entertained. That night, my mother told me I did fine, then spent 10 minutes telling Damon how proud she was that he sat still. Sibling cruelty didn't start loud with Damon. It started subtle. He learned that my mistakes were punished and his were explained away. He learned that if he pushed me and I reacted, I was the problem. He learned that tears worked better than apologies. By the time we were teenagers, the power imbalance was baked in. Damon could insult me openly and call it a joke. If I objected, I was too serious. He could take my things, read my journals, mock my ambitions, and my parents would tell me to ignore him. When I needed help, I was told to handle it myself because I was strong. There was a night when I was 15 that still visits me in dreams. I had gotten into an advanced summer program out of state, something I desperately wanted. At dinner, my father mentioned it casually, and Damon slammed his fork down. "That's not fair," he said. "Why does she always get stuff?" I waited for my parents to defend me. Instead, my mother looked at me and said, "Aria, maybe you could wait a year. Damon's having a hard time right now." A year turned into never. The opportunity passed. Damon got a new gaming console that Christmas to cheer him up. That was the moment something hardened inside me. I realized my role wasn't to be loved. It was to be used as contrast. I was the example. Damon was the exception. And Damon knew it. He would smile at me sometimes, slow and knowing, like we were sharing a secret no one else could see. A look that said he understood the leverage he had, the space he occupied that I never would. He started telling people I was obsessed with being perfect. He'd joke that I thought I was better than everyone. Seeds planted early, watered often. I grew quiet, watchful. I stopped asking for fairness and started documenting everything in my head. Dates, words, patterns. Not because I planned revenge back then, but because some part of me knew memory was the only defense I had. The house we grew up in taught Damon he was untouchable. It taught me that survival meant endurance. And it taught both of us something else, something dangerous. That power doesn't come from truth. It comes from who people choose to believe. I didn't know it yet, but those childhood lessons were rehearsals. And Damon had been practicing his role for years. Didn't become strong all at once. Strength arrived in fragments, the way dawn sneaks into a dark room without asking permission. It started the year I realized no one was coming to rescue me. Not my parents, not Damon Vance, not the future version of myself I kept promising I'd become one day. So I started becoming her quietly. I worked after school first. Nothing glamorous. Stocking shelves under fluorescent lights that buzzed like trapped insects. My hands smelled like cardboard and detergent when I came home. Damon laughed when he saw my uniform once and said, "You know Dad doesn't need you to do that, right?" I didn't answer. I needed me to do that. Every paycheck felt like proof I existed on my own terms. College was the first real rupture. I chose a state school far enough to breathe but close enough to afford. Scholarships covered most of it. The rest I paid with loans I signed for myself, my name only. When my parents asked why I didn't apply to more prestigious places, I told them the truth dressed as practicality. Inside, I knew prestige came with strings, and I had spent my childhood tangled enough. I studied like hunger had teeth. Nights blurred into mornings in the library, the smell of burnt coffee and dust clinging to my clothes. I learned how to learn, how to break problems apart, how to sit with discomfort, how to keep going when praise never came. Damon texted sometimes, screenshots of parties, jokes about how college was a scam. I muted him and kept reading. My first internship paid barely enough to cover groceries, but it taught me how offices really worked, the quiet politics, the unspoken hierarchies, the power of being prepared. I watched who spoke and who listened, who got credit and who got buried. I promised myself I would never confuse silence with weakness again. The first time I signed a lease with my own name on it, my hands shook. The apartment was small, the kind where the radiator hissed like it was alive and the windows rattled when trucks passed. I sat on the bare floor that first night eating noodles from the pot, and for the first time in my life, the silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like permission. I bought a cheap desk from a thrift store and placed it near the window. That desk became my altar. Resumes, cover letters, notebooks filled with ideas. I taped a list above it, not affirmations, just facts. Things I had done. Things I had survived. When doubt crept in, I read the list aloud until my voice steadied. Work came next. Real work. Long hours, low pay at first, but responsibility that grew because I earned it. I learned to negotiate, to say no without apologizing, to document everything. I watched co-workers become friends over shared deadlines and late-night takeout. We laughed quietly in stairwells, celebrated small wins like they were championships. No one asked about my family. I didn't offer. Financial independence wasn't a single moment. It was a series of small clicks. The first time I paid a utility bill without checking my balance twice. The first time I said no to a job that didn't respect my time. The first time I realized I had savings, not much, but mine. Damon once joked at a family dinner that I was obsessed with money now. I smiled and passed the salt. There were emotional victories too, quieter but deeper. I learned to stop flinching when my phone buzzed. I stopped explaining myself to people committed to misunderstanding me. Therapy helped. So did journaling, running at dawn, learning to sit with my own thoughts without spiraling. I built routines that held me when old memories tried to pull me under. When promotions came, I accepted them without shrinking. When mistakes happened, I owned them without shame. I started mentoring interns, recognizing pieces of myself in their hunger and fear. I told them what no one told me: document your work, trust your instincts, don't confuse being nice with being safe. Damon Vance drifted in and out of my periphery like a bad signal. He struggled. Jobs didn't stick. Plans changed weekly. My parents asked me to help him more than once. I helped when it didn't cost me my spine. When it did, I declined. Each no felt like reclaiming a bone I'd been missing. The day I opened my first investment account, I cried in my car afterward. Not because of the money, but because it meant I was thinking beyond survival. I was planning, building, choosing a future that didn't revolve around reacting to someone else's chaos. I didn't announce my milestones. I didn't post them. I lived them. Quiet mornings, steady evenings, a life stitched together with intention. The strength I built wasn't loud. It was structural. It was the kind that holds when everything shakes. And somewhere beneath it all, a low hum of unease remained. Because growth changes the balance of a room. Because independence threatens people who benefit from your dependence. Because Damon had been watching, even when I thought he wasn't. I felt it before I understood it. A tightening in conversations, a sharpened edge in his jokes, a curiosity that lingered too long on my successes. Something was shifting. The ground was preparing to move. I didn't know when it would happen. I only knew this: I was no longer the girl who rebuilt broken projects with tape and silence. And whatever was coming next would meet a version of me that could stand. Damon Vance didn't fall all at once. He unraveled in public, thread by thread, and every loose end somehow found its way back to me. It started with excuses. Little ones at first. A job he quit on principle. A boss who didn't get his potential. A startup idea that was going to change everything but somehow never made it past a half-built website and a logo he paid someone on Instagram to design. At family dinners, Damon leaned back in his chair and talked loud, confident, like success was just running late. My parents nodded along, eager to believe him, eager to protect the image of their golden child. I learned to recognize the look in his eyes then. It wasn't ambition. It was panic, masked as swagger. While my days filled with meetings, deadlines, and the quiet satisfaction of progress, Damon's filled with gaps. Long mornings asleep. Even longer afternoons scrolling. He started borrowing money with stories attached, just until the next deal closed, just until the investor called back. When I said no, calmly, he smiled too hard and said, "Relax, Aria. I'm family." It sounded like a warning dressed as a joke. The jealousy crept in sideways. Compliments with barbs hidden inside. "Must be nice to have everything handed to you," he said once, in front of our parents, as if scholarships, night shifts, and years of silence were some kind of inheritance. My mother laughed nervously and told him not to be bitter. My father changed the subject. No one corrected the lie. Damon noticed. Soon, my name started coming up in rooms I wasn't in. I'd hear about it later, filtered through concerned relatives or awkward texts. Damon had mentioned I was under a lot of pressure. That my job was probably not as stable as it looked. That I'd always been a little intense. The words were soft, plausible, designed to land without fingerprints. Every sentence carried the same implication: don't trust her version of events. I stayed quiet. Silence had kept me alive before. I hoped it would keep me safe now. The first real conflict erupted over nothing and everything. A group chat, the family one with too many emojis and forced cheer. I shared a small win, nothing flashy, just a milestone I was proud of. Damon replied with a laughing GIF and, "Hope this one's legit." The chat froze. Then my aunt typed, "What does that mean?" Damon didn't answer. He let the question hang like smoke. Later that night, he posted a vague story on Instagram. Black screen. White text. "Crazy what people will do for money." I watched the views climb. Friends texted me, confused. I told them it wasn't about me. I wasn't sure I believed it. The lies escalated. Damon started framing his failures as my interference. If he didn't get a job, it was because I'd poisoned the well. If a friend stopped returning his calls, it was because I'd said something. The logic was thin, but repetition gave it weight. My parents began asking careful questions, the kind that sound neutral but carry accusation underneath. You didn't talk to anyone at Damon's interview, did you? You wouldn't sabotage your brother, right? Each question felt like a small theft. Another piece of trust lifted quietly from my pocket. Online, Damon grew bolder. He subtweeted. He hinted. He replied to comments about nepotism and ethics with knowing smiles. Once, during a family barbecue, he raised his glass and said, "To transparency," looking straight at me. Laughter rippled around the table. I felt it then, a tightening in my chest, the sense that this wasn't random. This was rehearsal. I confronted him once, privately, hoping for something human to break through. He leaned against his car, arms crossed, sunlight catching the edge of his grin. "You're paranoid," Damon said. "If people think things about you, that's on you." Then he stepped closer and lowered his voice. "Besides, you've always been better at playing the victim." That night, I scrolled back through months of messages, posts, comments. Patterns emerged. Timing. Language. The same phrases echoed in different mouths. Damon wasn't just spiraling. He was curating a narrative, planting doubts like seeds and letting other people water them. The humiliation turned personal. He forwarded an email thread to our parents, selectively edited, to make it look like I'd lied about a deadline. He shared a screenshot in the family chat that cropped out context. When I corrected it, calmly, he accused me of being defensive. "If you've got nothing to hide, why explain so much?" he asked, and the room tilted in his favor. I felt the old wound ache, the one that told me I'd always have to prove what others were allowed to assume. Damon began showing up where I was. Events. Networking mixers. He'd hover just close enough to be seen, just far enough to overhear. He laughed too loudly at my jokes, then later told people I was performative. My parents closed ranks around him. He congratulated me publicly. He's just going through a rough whispered patch, doubts privately. My mother said. It was a careful demolition. My father warned me not to escalate. "You know how Damon is," he said, like that explained everything. Their loyalty felt conditional now, dependent on my willingness to absorb the damage quietly. I started documenting. Screenshots. Dates. Times. I didn't know why yet, only that something in me had shifted from endurance to readiness. Damon noticed my distance and mistook it for fear. His confidence grew sharper, more reckless. The night he humiliated me in the family group chat, posting a thread accusing me of unethical behavior, tagging people I barely knew, I realized how far he was willing to go. The messages poured in. Questions. Doubt. A few unfollows. Damon ended the thread with, "Just saying. Truth always comes out." I stared at the screen, heart pounding, and felt something settle. Not despair. Clarity. This wasn't sibling rivalry anymore. This was a campaign. And Damon Vance wasn't just jealous. He was desperate. I didn't respond that night. I didn't defend myself. I turned off my phone and sat in the dark, listening to my own breathing, letting the shock pass through me. Somewhere between the anger and the ache, a colder thought took shape. If he wanted a story, I would let him finish telling it. I just hadn't decided yet how many people would be watching when the ending arrived. The turning point didn't arrive loudly. It didn't crash through the door or announce itself with sirens. It arrived disguised as a thin white envelope, slipped under my apartment door on a Tuesday evening when I was too tired to cook and too numb to cry. I remember standing there, keys still in my hand, staring at my name typed in black ink like it didn't belong to me anymore. Aria Vance. Formal. Cold. Legal. Inside was a court notice. Damon Vance was suing me. Not quietly. Not privately. He was accusing me of financial misconduct related to our late father's company, claiming I had manipulated records, transferred assets illegally, and emotionally coerced him out of what was rightfully his. The words blurred as I read them. Fraud. Breach of fiduciary duty. Intent to deceive. I slid down against the door and laughed. A sharp, broken sound that startled even me. Our father had been gone for 2 years. 2 years of silence, of unresolved grief, of paperwork I handled because Damon couldn't deal with it emotionally. 2 years of me doing the unglamorous work while he told everyone I was obsessed with control. And now this. My phone started buzzing before I even finished reading. Missed calls. Messages. The family group chat lighting up like a crime scene. Someone had leaked the filing. Damon hadn't just sued me, he'd made sure everyone knew. Is this true? Arya, please tell me you didn't do this. Damon says he has proof. Proof. That word cracked something open in me. I called my mother. She didn't answer. I called my father's old business partner, the one who'd watched me work nights sorting contracts after the funeral. He sounded uncomfortable, distant. I think it's best we let the courts decide, he said, and I realized how quickly people retreat when accusation enters the room. By morning, it was everywhere. A finance blog picked it up first. Then local news. Then Twitter threads dissecting my name like it was a puzzle they couldn't wait to solve. Damon gave a statement, calm, wounded, rehearsed. This isn't about money, he said. It's about integrity. I watched the clip alone, sitting on the edge of my bed, hands shaking. That was the moment my chest finally caved in. Not because he lied, but because he sounded believable. My parents took his side publicly. Not fully, not outright, but enough. We just want fairness, my mother told a reporter. Damon has been through a lot. No mention of me. No defense. Just absence. That night, I broke. I cried until my throat burned and my eyes felt raw. I screamed into a pillow like I was 17 again, unheard and invisible. I replayed every moment I'd helped him, every time I'd covered for his mistakes, every lie I'd swallowed to keep the peace. The weight of it crushed me. I thought of walking away from everything, my career, my name, the company. Let him have it. Let the story end. But then something else crept in. Anger. Cold, precise, unfamiliar anger. I laid the court papers out on my kitchen table and read them again. Slower this time. I noticed inconsistencies. Dates that didn't line up. Claims that contradicted each other. Attachments that looked altered. Screenshots with odd cropping. Emails I didn't recognize, but that used phrases Damon always used, not me. My hands steadied. If Damon wanted war, he'd chosen the wrong battlefield. I hired a lawyer the next morning. A woman named Claire who didn't flinch when I told her everything. She listened, really listened, then asked one question that shifted the air in the room. Did you keep records? I smiled for the first time in weeks. Yes. I had. The investigation unraveled faster than I expected. Financial audits. Metadata analysis. Email headers. Damon had underestimated me. Again. He'd assumed I was still the sister who cleaned up quietly. He didn't know I'd learned to survive by documenting everything. We discovered forged signatures. Edited PDFs. Transfers he'd initiated but blamed on me. Worse, he'd been siphoning small amounts from the company for over a year, funneling them through shell accounts. The lawsuit wasn't just revenge. It was a smokescreen. When Claire laid it all out, I felt something inside me finally snap into place. The fear drained away, replaced by a terrible calm. The day my parents were deposed was the hardest. Sitting across from them, hearing my mother hesitate when asked if she trusted me, nearly broke me all over again. Damon watched from the corner, jaw tight, eyes darting. For the first time, he looked scared. Outside the courthouse, cameras waited. Damon tried to smile. I walked past him without a glance. That night, alone again, I didn't cry. I stared out my window at the city lights and realized something terrifying and freeing all at once. I was done trying to be understood. Whatever happened next, I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't explain. I wouldn't soften the truth to protect anyone who had already chosen to sacrifice me. This wasn't the end. It was the moment I stopped breaking and started becoming dangerous. The internet didn't wait for the truth. It never does. It started with a 15-second TikTok clip, grainy, badly cropped, and perfectly timed to destroy me. Someone had stitched an old video of me speaking at a finance seminar years ago. In the original clip, I'd been explaining internal audits and transparency. Calm, professional, confident. But in the viral version, the audio was chopped, rearranged, cut mid-sentence. Now it sounded like I was bragging. Sometimes you just move things around, people don't even notice. That line, ripped out of context, played on a loop, paired with dramatic music and bold white text. CEO admits to manipulating funds. The username was anonymous. 0 followers. 0 posts before this one. By midnight, it had 2.3 million views. TikTok turned me into a villain overnight. Duets poured in. Strangers pointing at the screen, shaking their heads. Y'all, this is why you can't trust rich women. She looks guilty. Her brother tried to warn everyone. Cancel her. Financial independence wasn't a single moment. It was a series of small clicks. The first time I paid a utility bill without checking my balance twice. The first time I said no to a job that didn't respect my time. The first time I realized I had savings, not much, but mine. Damon once joked at a family dinner that I was obsessed with money now. I smiled and passed the salt. There were emotional victories too, quieter but deeper. I learned to stop flinching when my phone buzzed. I stopped explaining myself to people committed to misunderstanding me. Therapy helped. So did journaling, running at dawn, learning to sit with my own thoughts without spiraling. I built routines that held me when old memories tried to pull me under. When promotions came, I accepted them without shrinking. When mistakes happened, I owned them without shame. I started mentoring interns, recognizing pieces of myself in their hunger and fear. I told them what no one told me. Document your work, trust your instincts, don't confuse being nice with being safe. Damon Vance drifted in and out of my periphery like a bad signal. He struggled. Jobs didn't stick. Plans changed weekly. My parents asked me to help him more than once. I helped when it didn't cost me my spine. When it did, I declined. Each no felt like reclaiming a bone I'd been missing. The day I opened my first investment account, I cried in my car afterward. Not because of the money, but because it meant I was thinking beyond survival. I was planning, building, choosing a future that didn't revolve around reacting to someone else's chaos. I didn't announce my milestones. I didn't post them. I lived them. Quiet mornings, steady evenings, a life stitched together with intention. The strength I built wasn't loud. It was structural. It was the kind that holds when everything shakes. And somewhere beneath it all, a low hum of unease remained. Because growth changes the balance of a room. Because independence threatens people who benefit from your dependence. Because Damon had been watching, even when I thought he wasn't. I felt it before I understood it. A tightening in conversations, a sharpened edge in his jokes, a curiosity that lingered too long on my successes. Something was shifting. The ground was preparing to move. I didn't know when it would happen. I only knew this. I was no longer the girl who rebuilt broken projects with tape and silence. And whatever was coming next would meet a version of me that could stand. Damon Vance didn't fall all at once. He unraveled in public, thread by thread, and every loose end somehow found its way back to me. It started with excuses. Little ones at first. A job he quit on principle. A boss who didn't get his potential. A startup idea that was going to change everything but somehow never made it past a half-built website and a logo he paid someone on Instagram to design. At family dinners, Damon leaned back in his chair and talked loud, confident, like success was just running late. My parents nodded along, eager to believe him, eager to protect the image of their golden child. I learned to recognize the look in his eyes then. It wasn't ambition. It was panic, masked as swagger. While my days filled with meetings, deadlines, and the quiet satisfaction of progress, Damon's filled with gaps. Long mornings asleep. Even longer afternoons scrolling. He started borrowing money with stories attached, just until the next deal closed, just until the investor called back. When I said no, calmly, he smiled too hard and said, "Relax, Aria. I'm family." It sounded like a warning dressed as a joke. The jealousy crept in sideways. Compliments with barbs hidden inside. "Must be nice to have everything handed to you," he said once, in front of our parents, as if scholarships, night shifts, and years of silence were some kind of inheritance. My mother laughed nervously and told him not to be bitter. My father changed the subject. No one corrected the lie. Damon noticed. Soon, my name started coming up in rooms I wasn't in. I'd hear about it later, filtered through concerned relatives or awkward texts. Damon had mentioned I was under a lot of pressure. That my job was probably not as stable as it looked. That I'd always been a little intense. The words were soft, plausible, designed to land without fingerprints. Every sentence carried the same implication: don't trust her version of events. I stayed quiet. Silence had kept me alive before. I hoped it would keep me safe now. The first real conflict erupted over nothing and everything. A group chat, the family one with too many emojis and forced cheer. I shared a small win, nothing flashy, just a milestone I was proud of. Damon replied with a laughing GIF and, "Hope this one's legit." The chat froze. Then my aunt typed, "What does that mean?" Damon didn't answer. He let the question hang like smoke. Later that night, he posted a vague story on Instagram. Black screen. White text. Crazy what people will do for money. I watched the views climb. Friends texted me, confused. I told them it wasn't about me. I wasn't sure I believed it. The lies escalated. Damon started framing his failures as my interference. If he didn't get a job, it was because I'd poisoned the well. If a friend stopped returning his calls, it was because I'd said something. The logic was thin, but repetition gave it weight. My parents began asking careful questions, the kind that sound neutral but carry accusation underneath. "You didn't talk to anyone at Damon's interview, did you? You wouldn't sabotage your brother, right?" Each question felt like a small theft. Another piece of trust lifted quietly from my pocket. Online, Damon grew bolder. He subtweeted. He hinted. He replied to comments about nepotism and ethics with knowing smiles. Once, during a family barbecue, he raised his glass and said, "To transparency," looking straight at me. Laughter rippled around the table. I felt it then, a tightening in my chest, the sense that this wasn't random. This was rehearsal. I confronted him once, privately, hoping for something human to break through. He leaned against his car, arms crossed, sunlight catching the edge of his grin. "You're paranoid," Damon said. "If people think things about you, that's on you." Then he stepped closer and lowered his voice. "Besides, you've always been better at playing the victim." That night, I scrolled back through months of messages, posts, comments. Patterns emerged. Timing. Language. The same phrases echoed in different mouths. Damon wasn't just spiraling. He was curating a narrative, planting doubts like seeds and letting other people water them. The humiliation turned personal. He forwarded an email thread to our parents, selectively edited, to make it look like I'd lied about a deadline. He shared a screenshot in the family chat that cropped out context. When I corrected it, calmly, he accused me of being defensive. "If you've got nothing to hide, why explain so much?" he asked, and the room tilted in his favor. I felt the old wound ache, the one that told me I'd always have to prove what others were allowed to assume. Damon began showing up where I was. Events. Networking mixers. He'd hover just close enough to be seen, just far enough to overhear. He laughed too loudly at my jokes, then later told people I was performative. He congratulated me publicly, then whispered doubts privately. It was a careful demolition. The bank records took longer. I didn't rush. I didn't panic. I hired a forensic accountant recommended quietly by my lawyer, someone who didn't care about social media narratives, only numbers. We traced shell accounts, side transfers, payments labeled as consulting fees to companies that didn't exist. Each discovery felt surreal, not shocking, just clarifying. Damon hadn't stolen impulsively. He'd stolen comfortably, because he never believed consequences applied to him. I spoke to witnesses next. Former assistants who'd quit abruptly. A junior accountant who'd been let go after raising concerns. A security guard Damon thought was invisible. I didn't threaten. I didn't beg. I told them one thing. I'm done protecting him. That sentence unlocked more truth than any contract ever could. People are loyal to silence, until silence becomes dangerous. Then came the legal consultations. Plural. I didn't want revenge. I wanted precision. Corporate lawyers. Defamation experts. Digital forensics specialists. We discussed timing. Jurisdiction. Public disclosure versus court strategy. One lawyer looked at me and said, quietly, "You don't need to prove you're innocent. You need to prove he's consistent." That changed everything. Because consistency is what liars can't fake forever. Something inside me shifted during those weeks. I stopped flinching when my phone buzzed. Stopped rereading hate comments. Stopped trying to be understood. My posture changed. My voice steadied. My emotions sharpened into focus. Pain had burned away the softness Damon relied on. And for the first time, I wasn't reacting to him. I was studying him. The plan wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was patient. Step 1, let Damon keep talking. Step 2, let the internet get bored. Step 3, release nothing, until everything could be released at once. Truth is most powerful when it arrives complete. I scheduled nothing publicly. No teasers. No threats. Just one quiet preparation after another. Every file labeled. Every clip authenticated. Every witness statement notarized. I slept better than I had in months. Because for the first time since Damon accused me, I knew exactly how this would end. And he didn't. One night, while reviewing the final compiled file, I caught my reflection in the dark screen. I didn't recognize the woman looking back. She wasn't angry. She wasn't desperate. She was calm. Controlled. Unavoidable. I closed the laptop and whispered to the empty room. You wanted everything, Damon. I smiled, not with joy, but with certainty. You're about to have it. And somewhere deep down, I knew. The fall wouldn't be loud. It would be documented. The courtroom smelled like old wood, cold air, and impatience. I noticed it before anything else because my body was hyper-aware. Every breath too loud, every blink too slow. The ceiling lights hummed faintly above us, sterile and unforgiving, like they were waiting for someone to break. Damon sat 3 rows ahead of me. Relaxed. Smiling. He leaned back in his chair as if this were just another meeting he'd hijacked. One arm rested casually on the bench, fingers tapping with boredom. When he turned and saw me, his smile widened, sharp, satisfied. That smile used to terrify me. Today, it told me exactly how blind he still was. Our parents sat beside him. Mother clutched her purse with white knuckles, eyes darting between Damon and the judge's bench like she was praying this would all disappear if she didn't look directly at it. Father stared straight ahead, jaw tight, shoulders stiff, his favorite posture when pretending nothing was wrong. I felt that familiar sting in my chest. The old one. The one that whispered, they'll choose him again. I inhaled slowly. Not today. The judge entered. Everyone stood. The room settled into silence so thick it felt physical, pressing against my ribs. Damon's lawyer began first. Confident. Polished. Cruel in a professional way. He painted me as manipulative. Calculating. The responsible daughter who took advantage of a grieving family. He spoke about forged documents, stolen authority, betrayal. I watched my parents as he spoke. Mother nodded faintly at certain points. Father's lips pressed thinner. Damon never looked at them. He watched me, as if daring me to crack. Then it was my turn. I stood. For a split second, the room tilted. My knees locked, not from fear, but from memory. Of every time I'd stayed quiet. Of every time I'd swallowed the truth to keep the peace. My lawyer spoke first, calm and measured, laying groundwork. And then he said, Ms. Vance will now address the court. Every sound faded. I could hear my own breathing. I stepped forward. Damon's smile flickered. Just slightly. I never wanted to be here, I said. My voice echoed softly, steadier than I expected. I never wanted this to be public. I never wanted my family turned into evidence. Mother's head snapped up. Father shifted. Damon rolled his eyes. I looked directly at the judge. But I learned something important these past few months, I continued. Silence doesn't protect the truth. It only protects the lie. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Damon leaned forward now. Interested. I nodded to my lawyer. The screen behind us lit up. The first exhibit appeared, a timeline. Dates. Times. Transfers. I watched Damon's posture stiffen. This, I said, pointing, is every financial transaction Damon Vance claimed he never touched. Damon scoffed loudly. This is ridiculous. Please, the judge warned. Damon raised his hands in mock surrender, but I saw it then. The first crack. The next slide appeared. Audio waveform. A voice filled the room. His voice. Relax, Arya. If anything goes wrong, they'll blame you. You're the responsible one. The room froze. Mother gasped. Father turned, slowly, painfully, toward Damon. Damon's face drained of color. That's taken out of context, he snapped, standing halfway. You can't. Sit down, the judge said sharply. For the first time in my life, Damon obeyed. I didn't stop. I kept going. CCTV footage played next. Grainy but clear. Damon entering the office late at night. Accessing locked cabinets. Leaving with folders tucked under his arm. A timestamp glowed in the corner. 2:14 a.m. I spoke quietly now. Almost gently. You told everyone you were out of town that week, I said, eyes never leaving him. You posted photos from Miami. Remember? Screenshots appeared. Instagram stories. Beach lights. Cocktails. Then bank records. Transfers that aligned perfectly with those same dates. The courtroom buzzed. Whispers. Gasps. I saw Mother's hand fly to her mouth. Father stood abruptly, chair scraping loudly behind him. Damon, he whispered. Tell me this isn't true. Damon looked at him. Really looked at him. And for the first time, he didn't have an answer ready. This is a setup. Damon shouted suddenly, voice cracking. She planned this, she's always been jealous. Of what? I asked softly. The question sliced through his rant. He stared at me, breathing hard, eyes wild. The silence stretched. Then he exploded. You think you're better than me, he screamed. You always did. Dad trusted you, Mom praised you, this was supposed to be mine. There it was. Raw. Ugly. Undeniable. The truth he'd never meant to confess. Mother sobbed. Actual, broken sobs. Father looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 seconds. The judge called for order, but no one moved. Damon laughed suddenly, a hysterical, hollow sound. You don't get it, he said, shaking his head. I did what I had to do. I stepped closer, met his eyes. You didn't have to destroy me, I said quietly. My voice didn't shake. That's what broke him. The final evidence appeared. A signed confession attempt Damon had sent to a shell company accountant, thinking it was private. It wasn't. The courtroom erupted. The judge slammed the gavel. Security moved in. Damon backed away, hands raised, panic finally consuming him. No, wait, this isn't how it was supposed to go. As they escorted him forward, his eyes locked onto mine. Not with hatred. With fear. Pure, dawning fear. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just watched. Because the truth didn't need emotion anymore. It stood on its own. And as the doors closed behind my brother, the room fell into a stunned, reverent silence. The kind that comes only after lies finally collapse. I exhaled slowly. This wasn't the end. But it was the moment everything changed. And everyone finally saw who Damon Vance really was. Damon didn't look powerful anymore. He looked small. That realization hit me a week after the courtroom, when his name began to disappear from places it once dominated. His LinkedIn headline vanished first. Then his profile photo. Then the congratulatory comments from people who used to call him visionary and the rightful heir. Silence replaced applause. And silence is louder than screams. The company board moved fast. Faster than I expected. Damon was officially removed from any claim to our father's business pending criminal investigation. Fraud. Document tampering. Identity misuse. Charges stacked neatly, like bricks sealing a wall he could no longer climb. When the news broke, it didn't explode. It spread. Slow. Relentless. Business blogs picked it up. Then finance Twitter. Then TikTok accounts that specialized in corporate scandals started stitching courtroom clips with dramatic music and captions like "When nepotism backfires." I watched one video at midnight, my phone glowing in the dark. It showed Damon yelling in court. Then cut to the CCTV footage. Then cut to me standing calm, steady, unshaken. The comments were brutal. Wow. He really thought he could get away with that. She didn't even raise her voice. That's power. He destroyed his sister and still lost everything. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt quiet. Damon lost his job the following Monday. Not fired. Dropped. The firm released a statement distancing themselves from any individual involved in unethical or illegal activity. His former mentor unfollowed him. His so-called friends stopped replying. Group chats went silent. Invitations vanished. I heard all of this secondhand. From our mother. She called me one evening, voice trembling, confused, finally stripped of denial. They froze his accounts, Aria, she whispered. He says everyone abandoned him. I closed my eyes. Did he mention how many nights I begged him to stop? I asked softly. She didn't answer. My parents came over a few days later. They stood in my apartment doorway like strangers. Mother cried the entire time. Apologies poured out of her, messy, tangled, late. She kept saying she hadn't known, that she never imagined Damon would do something so cruel. Father sat silently on my couch, staring at the floor. Finally, he spoke. I failed you. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. But it landed heavier than any scream. I nodded once. I know. That was all I said. Damon tried to contact me. First through emails. Then voicemails. Then a handwritten letter slipped under my door by someone who still pitied him. I never opened it. Some truths don't need revisiting. The legal process moved forward without me needing to push. Evidence did that for me. Witnesses did that. His own arrogance did that. When the formal charges were announced, his name trended again. This time with no defenders. No spin. Just consequences. I sat alone on my balcony that night, city lights blinking like distant stars, and realized something quietly monumental. I had won. Not because Damon lost, but because I didn't have to fight anymore. Peace arrived slowly. Not like fireworks. Like breath returning after years underwater. I redecorated my apartment. Changed routines. Took mornings off. Started therapy, not because I was broken, but because I deserved to heal properly. I stopped explaining myself. Stopped proving. Stopped apologizing for surviving. The company stabilized under new leadership. I retained my position, but on my terms. Distance. Boundaries. Clarity. Sometimes, my mother still asks about Damon. I answer honestly. I hope he gets help. And I mean it. But from far away. One morning, months later, I passed my reflection in a glass building downtown. I almost didn't recognize her. Not because she looked different, but because she looked free. No fear behind the eyes. No weight in the shoulders. Just calm. I smiled faintly and kept walking. Because the revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel. It was complete. And the most powerful thing I ever did wasn't destroying my brother. It was refusing to let him destroy me again. Funny how he tried to take everything from me, and ended up handing me my life back.